The sun had just started to dip behind the row of small houses, casting long shadows across the quiet street. In the yard of one house, a father was playing with his young daughter, her laughter echoing through the air. He was a man of medium build with tattoos on his arms, symbols of memories and milestones that told the story of his life. His hands were rough from years of work, but his smile was gentle and warm as he lifted his daughter high, spinning her around until she squealed with delight. From the sidewalk, a woman watched. She lived in the neighborhood and had seen the father before, though only from a distance. She noticed the tattoos and the man's imposing appearance, and an unease grew inside her. Something about the sight made her heart race, a sense of danger she could not quite explain. She told herself it was just caution, a natural instinct to protect herself and her surroundings. But the feeling gnawed at her. Her eyes followed every move, paying close attention to the man as he interacted with his daughter. He was talking to her in a calm voice, telling stories, making funny faces, and helping her practice her balance on the grass. Yet despite the happiness she could see, she couldn't shake the worry that lingered in her mind. After a few minutes, she made a decision. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed the local police. She described a man she saw in the yard, noting his tattoos, the way he was holding the child, and how unusual it looked to her. Her voice was firm but carried a subtle note of fear. She did not hear the laughter clearly or see the warmth in the father's actions. All she could focus on was her anxiety and assumptions. Meanwhile, the father had begun to notice someone watching. His daughter was still spinning in his arms, and he glanced up at the woman, offering a friendly wave that went unnoticed. He returned his attention to his daughter, trying to ignore the feeling of being observed. He felt a strange tension in the air, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. Parents always had to be careful, he thought. But this was something different, a discomfort that made his chest tighten. The woman stayed on the sidewalk, talking softly to herself as she described everything she thought she saw to the police dispatcher. She added details about the tattoos, the man's build, and the way he moved, imagining threats where there were none. She imagined the worst possible scenario, each thought fueling her decision to call authorities. She felt justified in her caution, believing she was protecting the child. Within minutes, the sound of sirens approached. The father froze, his daughter still in his arms. He had always taught her to stay calm in unexpected situations, and now he had to model that lesson himself. 2 police cars pulled into the street, lights flashing, drawing the attention of neighbors who began to peek out from their windows. The father's heart sank as officers approached, hands resting casually on their belts, eyes scanning him carefully. "Evening, officers," he said, his voice steady and polite. "Is there a problem?" One of the officers asked for his identification while the other spoke to the woman, who pointed in his direction. She described what she had seen, emphasizing the tattoos and the way he was holding the child. Her voice carried a note of urgency, a sense of alarm that did not match the calm reality of the father and daughter in the yard. The father explained calmly, showing his ID and answering questions. "I'm just watching my daughter play," he said. "We're practicing balance and having some fun. She's my child." The officers nodded, taking in his words and demeanor. They had seen many situations, both innocent and dangerous, and they were trained to evaluate without bias. They glanced around the yard, observing the father's interactions with the child, noting the laughter, the smiles, and the playful energy that contradicted the description given by the woman. The woman's anxiety did not lessen. She felt that she had done the right thing, even as the officers calmly spoke to the father and saw the truth. She fidgeted on the sidewalk, wringing her hands, her mind racing with possibilities she could not dismiss. She tried to explain further, but her words started to falter, and the officers gently asked her to step aside while they completed their check. Neighbors had begun to gather at the edges of the street, curious about the commotion. Some recognized the father and knew he was a good man, responsible and kind. Whispers spread quickly as they observed the situation, and a few voices spoke up defending him. "He's just with his daughter," one neighbor said. "Nothing suspicious here." The father's daughter tugged at his sleeve, asking why the flashing lights were there. He bent down, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. "Everything's okay, sweetie. Some people just get confused sometimes. Let's stay calm and watch the lights for a bit." He lifted her up slightly so she could see the flashing colors, turning the moment into a small game. She giggled, forgetting her brief worry. while he maintained his composure. Inside, though, he felt a mix of frustration and sadness. It was a strange experience to be judged so quickly, based on appearances without anyone taking the time to understand. The officers completed their check, verifying his story and ensuring everything was fine. They thanked him for his cooperation and explained to the woman that the situation was a misunderstanding. She nodded, feeling a mix of relief and lingering unease. Her fear had been strong enough to call for help, but now reality was clear. The father had done nothing wrong. As the officers left, the father took a deep breath, finally relaxing. He watched his daughter skip across the grass, her laughter filling the evening air once again. He reminded himself that not everyone would understand, and that patience and calm were sometimes the best responses to misunderstanding. The woman remained on the sidewalk for a moment longer, reflecting on what had just happened. She had assumed danger, acted on those assumptions, and now faced the truth. It was a lesson she hadn't expected to learn that day, one that would linger in her mind long after the sirens faded away. Life slowly returned to normal on the street. The small yard once again a place of laughter and play. The father continued his game with his daughter, lifting her into the air, spinning her around, and listening to her giggles. He knew that moments like these were precious, moments that mattered more than misunderstandings or fear. That evening, the father realized something important. He couldn't control other people's assumptions, but he could control how he responded to them. He could meet misunderstanding with patience and fear with calm. And as he looked at his daughter, smiling and carefree, he felt a sense of quiet pride. Despite the tension, the world had not taken away this small, perfect moment of joy. The woman finally turned and walked away, her steps slow, thoughtful. She had seen the truth, felt the embarrassment of her assumptions, and understood, in a small but real way, the impact of judging too quickly. Though it was uncomfortable, it was a first step toward change. And though she left quietly, the lesson would follow her, shaping her actions and thoughts in the days to come. The street grew quiet again as night settled in, the father holding his daughter close. He felt the cool breeze, smelled the faint scent of grass, and listened to her soft breathing as she rested against him. The incident would soon fade from view, but the warmth of this ordinary human moment stayed strong, a reminder that understanding and patience could withstand even the most sudden misunderstandings. The evening air was cool, and the sound of distant traffic mixed with the rustle of leaves. The father had just settled back on the small patch of grass, his daughter leaning against him, still giggling softly after their brief encounter with the police. The yard was quiet now, though a few neighbors lingered at the edge of the street whispering about what had just happened. Some shook their heads, others exchanged glances of disbelief, but all seemed to sense that the situation had been blown out of proportion. The woman who had called the police was still nearby, pacing slowly. Her mind replayed the events repeatedly. She had thought she was acting responsibly, protecting a child she didn't know, yet the reality she had witnessed told a different story. The father had been nothing but patient and kind, yet her fear had prompted an unnecessary call that now felt heavy on her conscience. She tried to shake the feeling, telling herself that it was better to be cautious than careless, but a small knot of guilt twisted in her stomach. The father noticed her standing there, shoulders slightly hunched, head tilted down as if he could see her thoughts. He straightened up, brushing off grass from his jeans, and walked toward her with a calm, steady pace. His daughter watched curiously, tilting her head and holding his hand lightly. He didn't want any more tension, but he also believed that kindness could sometimes open doors that fear could not. "Good evening," he said softly, not accusing or judging. His voice carried warmth and calm, the kind that could soothe even the most restless nerves. The woman looked up, startled that he had approached. She opened her mouth, but no words came at first. Then she managed a hesitant, I'm sorry." He nodded gently, understanding more than she could know. "It's okay," he said. "It happens. People see things and jump to conclusions. I get that." Her eyes widened slightly as if surprised by his forgiveness. She had expected anger or frustration, but not this quiet understanding. She looked at his daughter, who was watching with wide eyes, sensing that something important was happening between the adults. The child's innocence made the tension even sharper, highlighting the contrast between fear and reality. I saw you with your daughter and I didn't know what was going on," the woman said, her voice trembling. "I thought—" She stopped, struggling to find the right words as if she were trying to explain something she could hardly admit. "You thought something bad was happening," the father finished for her, nodding. "I understand. It's not uncommon to make assumptions, but sometimes those assumptions aren't right." She took a deep breath, the cool evening air filling her lungs, and nodded slowly. "I guess I didn't realize. I just saw tattoos and I didn't know you. It scared me for a moment." The father smiled faintly, but it was not a smile of mockery. It was patient and gentle. "That's all right. Fear can make us see things that aren't there, but it's good to step back and see what's really happening." The woman looked down, biting her lip, and then glanced at his daughter. The child waved slightly, a small gesture of friendliness that seemed to soften the woman's heart. She realized in that moment how human and ordinary the scene truly was. A father caring for his child, laughter filling the yard. A simple, normal evening that had been interrupted by her fears. The father bent down and picked up a small ball from the grass, rolling it gently to his daughter. She kicked it back, smiling, and the rhythm of play began again. The woman watched, realizing that the yard, the child, and the father's gentle presence were far removed from the danger she had imagined. A neighbor walked closer, having observed the interaction quietly from the edge of the street. "You know," the neighbor said to the woman, "he's been looking after that little one every evening. Always kind, always patient. Nothing unusual about it." The woman nodded, feeling the weight of embarrassment settle in. She had acted out of fear, misjudging a man she barely knew. She had assumed the worst based on appearances alone, and now she faced the consequences of her snap judgment. But it was also a moment of learning, a lesson she hadn't expected to encounter that evening. The father noticed her discomfort and spoke again, gently. "It's not easy to admit when we're wrong, but it's important. You did what you thought was right at the time. Now you see things differently, and that's what matters." She looked up at him, meeting his eyes. There was no anger, only understanding. The warmth in his expression reminded her that humanity often required patience, empathy, and forgiveness. It was a lesson in humility, one that she would not forget. Meanwhile, his daughter had grown tired from the play, her small body leaning against her father's side. He wrapped his arms around her, listening to her soft breathing and feeling her heartbeat. The yard returned to a peaceful scene, though the memory of the misunderstanding lingered for both adults. It was a quiet reminder of how easily fear could cloud judgment. The woman took a step closer, hesitant but determined to make amends. "I really am sorry," she said. "I didn't know, and I shouldn't have assumed." The father nodded again, his voice steady and kind. "I accept your apology. What's important is that we understand each other now. That's how things improve." A small conversation followed, not long or deep, but enough to bridge the gap that had formed. They spoke about the importance of seeing beyond appearances, the ways assumptions could hurt people, and the value of patience and observation. It was an ordinary conversation, but it carried weight, shaping the understanding of both adults. As the evening grew darker, the woman finally turned to leave, pausing to glance back at the yard. She felt a mix of relief and a quiet shame, realizing that the man she had judged so quickly had shown nothing but grace and understanding. The father waved lightly, smiling, and the daughter waved back, her small hand lifting in the fading light. The neighbor who had spoken earlier lingered for a moment, shaking their head slightly. "Sometimes it takes seeing the whole picture to understand," they said softly. The father nodded, knowing that moments like this were lessons for everyone involved. Fear, assumptions, and misunderstandings were part of life. But patience, understanding, and forgiveness could change the outcome. The father spent a few more minutes with his daughter before heading inside. He tucked her into bed, listening as her soft breathing deepened into sleep. He reflected on the evening, realizing how easily the world could misjudge him and others like him. Yet he also recognized the power of calm, the importance of responding with grace, and the lessons that misunderstandings could teach if handled with care. Outside, the woman walked home slowly, thinking about her actions and their consequences. The fear she had felt earlier seemed smaller now, replaced by a deeper understanding of her own assumptions. She knew she had been wrong, but she also understood that forgiveness and honesty could heal the discomfort she carried. In the quiet of the evening, the street returned to its usual calm. The father, having handled the situation with patience and integrity, knew that life would continue with its small moments of joy and challenges. The child slept peacefully, unaware of the tension that had passed. And the woman reflected on the importance of empathy and seeing the truth before acting on fear. It was a small but meaningful evening, one that reminded everyone involved that judgments could be wrong, but understanding and human connection could set things right. The father's patience and the woman's willingness to reflect created a moment of growth, a lesson in the quiet power of humanity, and a reminder that even in small neighborhoods, even in ordinary moments, the choices we make shape the way we see the world and each other. The next morning, the neighborhood woke to a soft sunlight that bathed the street in warmth. Birds chirped from the trees and the gentle hum of early traffic filled the quiet. The father had already begun his usual routine, preparing breakfast for his daughter before school. The events of the previous evening still lingered in his mind, but he chose to focus on the simple joys of life rather than the anxiety caused by fear and misunderstanding. He poured cereal into a small bowl, his daughter sitting patiently at the table, brushing her hair back as she chatted about the things she wanted to do that day. The father listened attentively, smiling at her energy, letting her speak freely. It was a calm, normal morning, but he knew that the memory of being misjudged would stay with him for a while. Across the street, the woman who had called the police walked slowly down the sidewalk. She had barely slept thinking about the father and his daughter. She kept replaying the events in her mind, questioning why she had acted so quickly, what had prompted the fear, and how she could make amends. Each thought carried a mix of guilt and self-reflection, a heavy but necessary feeling. She saw neighbors outside exchanging friendly greetings and starting their day. Her own steps were hesitant, and she paused to take in the sight of the father playing with his daughter in the yard. He was gently helping her put on a small backpack, preparing her for school. There was nothing threatening or unusual about it, just a father caring for his child. The scene hit her with a sense of clarity that only comes from seeing the truth firsthand. Her thoughts were interrupted by a small commotion nearby. A group of children gathered to greet the father's daughter, all excitedly talking about the day ahead. The father smiled, greeting each one with kindness, listening to their chatter and offering words of encouragement. His patience and warmth were evident to anyone watching, and the woman felt a pang of regret for having misjudged him. Unable to resist, she stepped closer, almost subconsciously. She wanted to speak, to apologize again, or at least express that she understood her mistake, but she hesitated, unsure how her presence would be received. The father noticed her standing across the street, eyes meeting briefly, and he gave a small nod, acknowledging her without judgment. This simple gesture encouraged her. She walked over, her steps slow but deliberate. "Good morning," she said softly. Her voice carried a mixture of hesitation and sincerity. The father smiled faintly, keeping his tone calm and welcoming. "Good morning. How are you? I just wanted to say I'm sorry again," she admitted. "I realize now that I judged you unfairly. I let my fear take over." The father nodded, a calm understanding in his eyes. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "It takes courage to admit when we're wrong. We all have moments like that, and learning from them is what matters." The woman felt a weight lift slightly from her shoulders. She had been carrying the embarrassment of her assumptions, and his understanding was like a gentle reminder that mistakes could be met with grace. She noticed how effortlessly he handled the situation, not holding a grudge, not letting anger take over. And then she realized that her fear had been unnecessary. Meanwhile, the daughter tugged at her father's hand, reminding him that they needed to leave for school. He nodded, giving the woman a final smile before attending to his child. The little girl waved at the woman, a small, innocent gesture that seemed to convey forgiveness in its own way. As they walked away toward the car, the woman remained behind, reflecting on the morning's light, the laughter of children, and the genuine kindness of the father. She thought about how quickly she had jumped to conclusions and how easily appearances could deceive. She realized that the father's tattoos, which she had fixated on the night before, meant nothing in the face of his character and actions. Later, she spoke to some neighbors, asking quietly about him. They shared stories of his generosity, his involvement in the community, and the care he showed for his child. Each story chipped away at the remnants of fear she had held on to, replacing it with respect and understanding. She began to see him not as a figure to fear, but as a person whose actions reflected love and responsibility. The father, meanwhile, had settled into his work for the day, taking on tasks with focus and dedication. Yet the morning's events and the woman's eventual approach stayed in his mind. He thought about how easily misunderstandings could happen, how fear could influence perception, and how patience and calm could transform tense situations into moments of understanding. It was a quiet, personal reflection, one that strengthened his resolve to act with grace in all situations. As the day continued, the woman found herself thinking about lessons beyond this one incident. She considered how often people judged based on looks, stereotypes, or fleeting impressions, and how harmful that could be. She realized that empathy and patience were tools she needed to cultivate, not just in interactions with strangers, but in everyday life. Back in the yard, the father returned home after work, finding his daughter already at play with a small group of neighborhood children. He smiled, appreciating the sense of community that existed even in small moments. He knew that the incident from the previous evening would fade over time, but the lessons from it, the resilience and patience, the power of calm, the importance of understanding, would remain with him. Later, the woman made a conscious choice. She walked to the yard once more, this time bringing a small gift, a simple gesture to show goodwill and acknowledgement of the misunderstanding. The father accepted it with a warm smile, appreciating not the gift itself but the sincerity behind it. They shared a brief conversation about life, community, and the way small moments could shape understanding. It was a simple human connection, built from humility, reflection, and forgiveness. As evening approached, the father sat on the porch with his daughter, watching the sunset. The day had been ordinary, but the echoes of lessons learned lingered in the air. Across the street, the woman reflected on her own growth, feeling a quiet gratitude for the opportunity to see beyond fear and learn empathy in action. The neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm, children playing, adults going about their routines, and the street filled with the soft hum of evening life. The father's patience, the daughter's innocence, and the woman's reflection created a small ripple in the community, a reminder that understanding could be born from tension, and that human connections could grow from the most unexpected places. By the end of the day, both adults felt a subtle shift within themselves. The father recognized the importance of calm and forgiveness. The woman understood the weight of assumptions and the value of humility. And the daughter, blissfully unaware of the complexities around her, learned through observation a quiet lesson about kindness and patience. It was a day that began with fear and misunderstanding, but ended with clarity and reflection. The father, his daughter, and the woman had each experienced growth in their own ways, and the neighborhood itself seemed just a little brighter, a little more aware of the power of empathy and the importance of seeing people for who they truly are. The next few days passed quietly in the neighborhood, but the memory of the incident remained in the minds of those involved. The father continued his daily routine with his daughter, attending to work, play, and study. He kept the events of that evening in perspective, knowing that misunderstandings could occur and that patience and grace were the best ways to respond. The woman, on the other hand, spent her mornings walking past the yard with a mixture of curiosity and reflection. She had learned a lot about herself, about fear, and about the power of assumptions. The previous night's events had unsettled her, but now she was determined to turn that unease into understanding and action. She decided to approach the father again, not with anxiety this time, but with a genuine intention to build a connection. She thought carefully about what she would say, wanting to convey both apology and acknowledgement. Holding a small gift, a simple token like a homemade treat for his daughter, she walked toward the yard with a steady pace. The father noticed her coming and stepped outside to greet her. His demeanor was calm, welcoming, and non-judgmental. The daughter ran toward them, curiosity sparkling in her eyes, and the woman handed her the gift with a soft smile. The child accepted it happily, thanking her politely while the father offered a nod of appreciation. "I wanted to apologize properly," the woman began, her voice calm but sincere. "I realized that my assumptions were wrong, and I didn't see the full picture. I'm truly sorry for causing any stress or fear." The father listened carefully, nodding. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. The important thing is that we understand each other now and we can move forward." They began a quiet conversation, not long or complicated, but filled with sincerity. She asked about his experiences as a parent, his daily routines, and how he spent time with his daughter. He spoke openly, showing warmth and care, explaining the small joys of playtime, bedtime stories, and learning moments shared together. The woman listened intently, realizing how easily fear could cloud perception and how meaningful it was to see people through their actions, not appearances. As the afternoon passed, neighbors noticed the interaction. Some smiled quietly, recognizing the moment as an example of growth and understanding. The father's grace and the woman's willingness to reflect created a subtle ripple of positivity in the community. People began to discuss the importance of empathy, patience, and looking beyond surface appearances. It was a lesson unfolding naturally, impacting those who observed. The daughter, ever curious, asked questions throughout their interaction. "Why were you scared before?" she asked innocently. The woman paused, thinking carefully about her answer. "Sometimes people worry when they don't know someone," she said gently. "But I see now that my worry was unnecessary, and I hope you understand that people can learn from their mistakes." The child nodded thoughtfully, her small face reflecting understanding beyond her years. The father smiled at the exchange, proud of how his daughter observed and absorbed the lesson. It was a small but powerful moment, one that showed how human connection and understanding could start from simple conversations and gestures. Over the next few hours, the woman continued to engage in small acts of kindness, helping in small ways and learning more about the father and daughter. She listened to their stories, shared her own reflections, and began to see the neighborhood in a new light. Her fear had been replaced by understanding, her assumptions by respect. She realized that growth often came from uncomfortable experiences, and that the willingness to reflect was key to becoming a better person. The father, for his part, continued to demonstrate patience and kindness. He did not dwell on the mistake made by the woman, instead using it as an opportunity to show grace and understanding. He knew that judgment and assumptions could be overcome through human connection, empathy, and calm communication. As the day turned to evening, the woman stayed a little longer, watching the father and daughter play together. She marveled at the trust, joy, and innocence present in their relationship. The father noticed her observation and smiled, understanding that actions often speak louder than words and that consistent kindness could build bridges where fear and misunderstanding once existed. Neighbors began to filter outside for the evening, some greeting the woman and the father with friendly waves. The warmth in the neighborhood grew, fueled by the demonstration of forgiveness, understanding, and human connection. People talked quietly about the incident, but now the story focused not on fear and assumptions but on learning, growth, and reconciliation. Before leaving, the woman spoke once more. "Thank you for showing me patience and kindness," she said. "I will remember this lesson and do my best to act differently in the future." The father nodded, smiling gently. "We all make mistakes," he replied. "What matters is what we do afterward and how we learn from them." She finally walked home, feeling a sense of relief and hope. The tension she had carried for days was easing, replaced by understanding and a commitment to be more aware of her assumptions. The father and daughter returned to their evening routine, filled with laughter, play, and the simple joys of family life. The yard, once a place of misunderstanding, had become a small space of reconciliation and connection. By nightfall, the street was quiet, the soft hum of life continuing under the fading light. The father reflected on the day, grateful for the opportunity to teach patience and understanding, not just to his daughter, but to someone who had misjudged him. The woman reflected as well, grateful for the chance to learn, to grow, and to see the world through a clearer lens. It was a day that began with tension and fear, but ended in connection and reflection. The father, the daughter, and the woman had all learned valuable lessons about human nature, assumptions, and the power of forgiveness. The neighborhood, too, benefited from the example set by patience, understanding, and empathy, creating a small but meaningful ripple of awareness and change. The following morning, the neighborhood was alive with the usual sounds of early life. Children laughed as they walked to school, parents called out goodbyes, and neighbors exchanged greetings as they began their day. The father and his daughter were already outside, enjoying a moment of calm before the bustle of school and work took over. The child ran ahead a few steps, giggling as her father called her back gently, making her practice balance on the sidewalk. It was ordinary, Yet ordinary had become extraordinary in its ability to show patience, care, and the beauty of small everyday interactions. The woman from across the street walked by carrying a small bag. She stopped for a moment, looking at the father and daughter playing together. There was no fear this time, only a quiet appreciation for what she had witnessed. The events of the past days had left a mark on her. Not a mark of shame, but one of reflection and understanding. She realized how quickly assumptions could cloud perception, and how small gestures, patience, and genuine care could restore trust and understanding. As she approached, the father noticed her presence and smiled warmly. She returned the smile, feeling a sense of relief and comfort in the familiarity of his kindness. The child waved at her and she waved back, a small bridge of connection formed through a simple, innocent gesture. "Good morning," she said softly. "I wanted to stop by to say thank you again." The father nodded, his voice calm and steady. "Good morning. You're always welcome here. The important thing is that we understand each other now." She handed the father a small note she had written, expressing her reflections and apologies more formally. It was a simple gesture, but it carried sincerity and humility. The father read it carefully, nodding as he finished. "I appreciate this," he said. "It means a lot that you took the time to reflect and share your thoughts." Neighbors passing by noticed the exchange, and a few stopped to observe. The mood was light, positive, and hopeful. What had begun as a moment of misunderstanding was now an example of growth, empathy, and human connection. People quietly acknowledged the power of patience, forgiveness, and the willingness to learn from mistakes. The woman stayed for a while, chatting casually with the father. They spoke about community, the importance of supporting one another, and ways to prevent fear from dictating actions. Her curiosity about the father's experiences as a parent led to stories of simple joys, bedtime stories, learning how to ride a bike, small victories and achievements that brought immense happiness. The father spoke openly not just about the past, but about hope, resilience, and the importance of kindness. His daughter played nearby, occasionally joining the conversation with innocent questions and comments. Her presence reminded them both of the lessons that could be learned from the youngest members of the community: openness, trust, and the ability to forgive and move forward. The child's laughter filled the air, mingling with the soft murmur of conversation, creating a sense of harmony in the yard. Later, the woman decided to help in small ways around the yard, picking up toys, tidying small areas, and offering simple assistance. The father accepted this quietly, appreciating the gestures not for their material value, but for the acknowledgement and effort behind them. The act of working together created a subtle bond, bridging any remaining gaps from previous misunderstandings. Throughout the day, the neighborhood observed with quiet admiration. Conversations among neighbors shifted from recounting fear to celebrating understanding. People talked about how easy it was to make snap judgments, the dangers of stereotyping, and the importance of empathy. The father's patient response and the woman's willingness to reflect and grow became a model of human decency in action. As evening approached, the father gathered his daughter for a short walk. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, and the air carried a gentle breeze. They walked slowly, observing the neighborhood, greeting familiar faces and feeling the sense of community around them. The woman followed at a distance, reflecting on her personal growth and how one small interaction could ripple into a broader understanding. At the end of the walk, the father paused near a small bench and sat with his daughter, holding her hand. The woman approached and stood nearby, quietly observing the moment. She realized how fortunate she had been to learn such a lesson, how the father's patience had transformed fear into insight, and how human connection could grow from even the most tense beginnings. The father spoke to his daughter softly. "People sometimes misunderstand each other," he said. "But if we are patient and kind, and if we try to see the truth, we can turn mistakes into learning and understanding." The daughter nodded, absorbing the lesson with the quiet wisdom that children often possess. She looked at the woman and gave a small smile, showing that forgiveness and kindness could be simple and natural. The woman returned the smile, feeling the depth of the lesson in that small, unspoken exchange. As the day came to a close, the neighborhood returned to calm. The father and daughter went inside, the warmth of family and understanding filling the home. The woman returned to her own house, reflecting on the transformative power of empathy and the responsibility to act thoughtfully rather than reactively. She knew that the incident had changed her perspective, teaching her patience, humility, and the importance of seeing beyond appearances. The story of those few days slowly spread through conversations and quiet discussions, emphasizing lessons rather than fear. Neighbors spoke about the importance of giving people the benefit of the doubt, of understanding actions rather than making assumptions, and of building bridges through dialogue and patience. The father's response and the woman's reflection became a small but powerful example for the entire community. In the days that followed, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The father and daughter continued their routines filled with laughter, learning, and care. The woman engaged with the community in a more thoughtful way, reflecting on her assumptions and striving to see people with clarity and compassion. Their interactions became occasional moments of friendship, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. The neighborhood, once quietly witnessing a moment of tension, now carried the memory as a lesson in empathy and human connection. People were reminded that fear and assumptions could be transformed through patience, reflection, and genuine kindness. The father's calm and understanding, the woman's willingness to reflect and learn, and the daughter's innocence combined to create a story of growth, reconciliation, and the quiet power of humanity. By the end of the week, the father and daughter were playing in the yard once again, ordinary moments of joy filling the space. The woman stopped by briefly, exchanging greetings and smiles, a small acknowledgement of the journey they had all experienced. It was a story not of fear or conflict, but of understanding, growth, and the strength of human connection. In the quiet of the evening, the father watched his daughter run and laugh, feeling the calm of resolution and the warmth of community. Across the street, the woman reflected on her journey, grateful for the lesson learned and the opportunity to see beyond fear. The small neighborhood had been witness to misunderstanding, reflection, and reconciliation, leaving a lasting impression that would guide interactions, empathy, and understanding for years to come. It was a story that began with assumptions and fear but ended in patience, forgiveness, and human connection. The father, his daughter, and the woman had each experienced growth, and their story became a gentle reminder that understanding and kindness could turn even tense situations into moments of reflection and hope. The community, too, carried the lesson forward, embracing the idea that empathy and human decency were the foundation of lasting relationships, peace, and trust.